Coming up on today's Unscripted Faith, we have two amazing guests with powerful stories of transformation. Chris Janssen, a leading performance coach, best-selling author, will share her journey of overcoming addiction and self-sabotage, offering hope and practical steps for anyone struggling.
Plus, we'll also be joined by Pastor Chris Moran, lead pastor of Eternal City Church in Pittsburgh, who will share his story and talk about how his church is spreading love and the gospel in their community. Don't miss this inspiring episode about faith, freedom, and living a full life right now on Unscripted Faith.
Here we go! Welcome to Unscripted Faith. We are so excited that you joined us today, and we don't think you'll be disappointed. We have two amazing conversations ahead of us.
With the same name.
With the same name. It don't get better than that.
It don't get no better. It's just going to be a great day today. And as always, we're so thankful that you guys have welcomed us into your world. Yes. And this is an episode you're not going to want to miss.
No, truly impactful. So our next guest is a leading performance coach, best-selling author, and expert in helping high achievers break free from self-sabotage and perfectionism. With over 20 years of experience, Chris Janssen has empowered athletes, creatives, entrepreneurs, and others to close the gap between where they are and where they want to be. She'll be sharing her inspiring journey of overcoming addiction and offering insights on how we can all live a life of freedom and fulfillment. Chris, welcome to Unscripted Faith.
Thank you, Anthony and Angela. I'm so happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. So girls, share with us your God story.
God is good. My God story, I've known Jesus since I was tiny, since before I can remember. And I will share my struggle with addiction. It was addiction to alcohol. And I've been sober. I got sober in 2007. I entered a recovery group. So I say nowadays I was sober before being sober was cool, because we have a lot, like it's become easier culturally. Right now it's wonderful. We have mocktails and people are going alcohol free for health reasons, and it's not stigmatic anymore to say I don't drink alcohol. In 2007, I was really confused. I was a very, same as I am now, a high functioning, high achieving mom of 3 little kids, had a successful marriage. I was an athlete. All these things in my life were going really well. Christian, very involved at my church, women's retreat leader, PTA president, all these things. And I had this addiction to alcohol where I could not moderate alcohol like the next person. And because I had not known, my family didn't drink, their parents didn't drink. I didn't know anyone in my experience who had either identified as an alcoholic or been to a recovery group or struggled with the same thing. So I was just very confused. I thought I was weak and undisciplined, even though everything in my life would say otherwise. Because I couldn't figure out this one thing, how to moderate alcohol like the people I saw next to me doing, I really villainized myself for that. So back then it was, I believed that if you went to recovery and said you had a problem with this, I just thought everybody in recovery was drinking from a paper bag under a bridge, maybe. I had no idea. So I actually did. I asked a pastor about it. I asked a therapist about it. I asked my medical doctor about it. I asked good friends about it. And everyone, because of what they saw on the outside, said, "Oh, honey, you don't have a problem. Recovery is not for you. You're fine." And so I just was confused. And I really thought, because I can't get this one thing under control, I'm a monster. That was my narrative, that I'm a monster because of this one thing. And so one night enough was enough, and I did look up a recovery group online. Went the next day. It was an all women's meeting, and a woman in the meeting who knew it was my first time, because I was like a deer in the headlights, said to me, "It's not your fault. You have a condition. It's like an allergy, and you never have to have another drink again." And in that moment, all this shame I'd been carrying on my shoulders, and guilt and self-loathing, really, for trying to kick this thing and figure this confusing thing out on my own, all of that flew off my shoulders. And the narrative switched from "I'm a monster because I can't quit drinking alcohol" to "I'm deserving of community and recovery because I can't quit drinking alcohol." So I stayed in that group and learned what it means to get sober in community, and I didn't have shame anymore. And that was the first time in my whole life. I was 37 years old. This was in 2007. That was the first time in my whole life I realized there were other people like me, and that I wasn't just this big weirdo. And so I think where God comes into that, I mean, he's in everything of that. He led me to the meeting, but I think I believed I was asking God to help me quit this thing on my own. And with community in the group, I learned how to allow God to help me quit this thing.
Wow.
With him and with the group, not alone anymore.
You know, that's really outstanding. I have a background in drug and alcohol as a counselor, mental health, and all of that. And, you know, one of the things that I have found out is a lot of people think, to your point, that someone that has an alcoholic or a drug addict, they're going to be under a bridge somewhere, have a brown paper bag with a 40 ounce or something like that in there. And I've had guys that were making over 6 figures that lost everything, working on Wall Street, that lost everything. But they had to come to a point in their life where they realized something needed to change. Yeah. Where was that place in your life that you realized? Because I heard you say enough was enough. Yeah. But what was that point where things changed for you?
Yeah, what happened?
This is important for people to hear. It doesn't have to look like a rock bottom, like we may think it may look. My rock bottom, which I call a pain threshold, the pain of staying the same became greater than the pain of changing. Mine was doing back to school paperwork one night. I was very overwhelmed doing back to school paperwork for 3 kids, and I was drinking wine, which culturally seemed like my brain thought that was a normal thing to do. I should be able to take the edge off. I'll have a glass of wine. I'll sit down and do this paperwork. Well, if you're unable to moderate alcohol like I am, that's a problem. So I just kept drinking more and more wine, and eventually blacked out that night. And that was the night that I looked up in the middle of the night this meeting and went the next day. Now that bottom, that hitting that pain threshold, had been worse before. This wasn't the most alarming thing. It was just that is what God used to say enough is enough. I couldn't take the shame and guilt anymore. It was enough shame and guilt over the fact that I couldn't moderate the alcohol, but then I had this double shame over, this is just back to school paperwork. This is normal mom stuff. You're a mom. Get it together. You should be able to do this. I was just that, shooting on yourself, and these standards that were that I was holding myself to that were unrealistic. That was the night enough was enough for me.
Wow. I think it's really interesting because I do feel like there is a culture among moms in particular that are dealing with this very struggle and are afraid to say anything about it. Let me ask you, where did you feel like that struggle began? Like, why did it start?
It started very innocently, which I think happens for a lot of us. I don't think any of us really sit down and say, hey, I'd love to have this addiction. I want to get hooked on this thing, right? Whether it's alcohol or anything. So I think it started as fun in college, and it was social. There was not a problem. And then it turned into a soother, like I said, for for the back to school paperwork, that was using it as a soother. And so I think I was using this substance to just meet basic human needs, right? Soothing that paperwork, but also still, if we were out with friends, for fun. There were different reasons. And then over time, that soother became a ritualistic soother, and then it became a harmful addiction. And with things like alcohol, it does work that way. It's progressive. It does, I believe, get worse over time, where I can't go back. In recovery, we say we've been pickled. A pickle can never go back to being a cucumber. So because I used it and had a struggle with it and got to the point where it was, I drank where it was a problem for me, I can't go back. I can't just turn that off. It progresses with age and with time, and I cannot it doesn't matter how great of a life coach I am, how great these life skills I have are, it doesn't matter. All of those tools that I know will not make me able to go back and moderate alcohol the way a person can that does not have a problem with it.
It's amazing that you say that, because a lot of people don't ever grasp that. And seeing now 18 years, you are definitely qualified to do what you're doing now. Tell us in our last minute together, what is it that you're doing now to help others?
I wrote a second book called Grace Yourself, How to Show Up for the Sober Life You Want. The first book, Living All In, How to Show Up for the Life You Want, had a chapter in it about addictions and patterns. And so I took that chapter and made a whole book about it, where I can present my coaching skills. And in order to present these skills, I thought, you know what, a lot of this stuff that has people stuck and in these strongholds, I'll just go ahead and share my story of recovery and addiction to alcohol so that people can have a visual, and then take the tools I'm providing and apply it to anything that they're stuck with.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for your story, and thank you so much for putting it in pages so that others can glean from it. Thanks for being with us today on Unscripted Faith.
Thank you so much. I was so happy to be here.
Yes. Well, before we head to break, we need your help. Ask Amy has a hotline where you can ask hot topic questions about faith, forgiveness, or overcoming struggles, just to name a few. So call 412-349-4332. Leave your question and you might hear it answered on our Ask Amy segment. Again, that number is 412-349-4332. We can't wait to hear from you.
And up next, we're joined by Pastor Chris Moran from Eternal City Church in Pittsburgh. Stay tuned to hear his story and how his church is making a powerful impact right here in our area. We'll be right back after this short break.
Are you looking for spiritual inspiration and intellectual stimulation in the same place? Do you need activities that reduce stress and boost your mental health? Look no further. This month, when you give your best gift of support to Cornerstone Television, we'll send you this large print Bible Word Search devotional as our thank you to you. These devotions, scriptures, and 100 word search puzzles will encourage your spirit and engage your mind in the many promises and blessings of God. Soak in the unchanging love and faithfulness of your Creator, beautifully captured in the book of Psalms. Ask for your copy of the large print Bible Word Search devotional when you give this month to support Christian television through Cornerstone Network. Give online at ctvn.org/donate or call us at 888-665-4483. Thank you for making us your home for Christian television.
Many of our viewers share how much they love the ministers on Cornerstone Television. Carolyn wrote to us saying, "Yesterday, our church canceled because of an ice storm. I was able to hear several messages on your station. Thank you so much for your faithfulness." We're so thankful for this too. Our heart is to offer Bible-based programs that help you grow in your relationship with the Lord. Thank you for making us your home for Christian television.
Welcome back to Unscripted Faith. Our next guest is the lead pastor of Eternal City Church right here in Pittsburgh. Pastor Chris Moran, along with his wife Megan, planted the church in 2014 with a passion for spreading the love of Jesus Christ in their community. As a part of the Acts 29 network, they are committed to loving and serving others with the gospel at the heart of everything they do. Pastor Chris, it's great to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me. Excited.
Now listen, let's get right in on it because you've got a story and a half. You met your lovely bride today back in junior high school around the 7th and 8th grade.
7th, 8th grade. We started dating.
And you're still together. But it hasn't always been like this, and it's been rough at times.
Yeah.
Take us through your God story and tell us about how the Lord redeemed you.
Yeah, thanks. So, met my wife in 8th grade. And we dated and we were partying. You know, we were not Christians. Even though I grew up in a Christian home, my parents were both faithful Christians, biblical Christians. Shared the gospel with me, sang Jesus songs at night, prayed with me. You know, Sunday school, Sunday morning for Sunday school, and then service, and then Sunday night, and then Wednesday youth group, all that. That was my background. But I rebelled and went after drugs and alcohol. And my wife, current wife now, you know, did that with me as a young teen. And I got into selling drugs and using them, and God was gracious to allow me to get busted. The narcotics detectives in my hometown raided my house. I was 17 years old, and I was at school, and they went up and tore my room apart and found the money, found the drugs, found the paraphernalia, and they came to school and got me out of class, and I, got handcuffed. They read me my rights and tried to get me to inform on who I was getting my supply from. And my now wife, Megan, stayed with me through all that. You know, I spent a couple weeks in Schumann because I was 17, almost 18, so God was merciful to allow me to not have to go to, the county. And so after that, I had parole. You know, I had regular drug testing and had to check in and was kind of on house arrest without a bracelet, where if they called and I wasn't there and I didn't have a window, I would, further consequences. I was allowed to go to church. That was the one thing I was allowed to do, work in church.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so I went back to the church I grew up in. It was the Penn Hills Christian Missionary Alliance Church. And though I don't think I was born again at that time, I was listening. I was listening to the sermons. I even started singing the songs, after a couple years of being there. And when I was 19, definitively, I was born again. He grabbed me, and everything changed. I no longer wanted to drink or use, and I would go to parties still because I didn't have any Christian friends. Megan was not a Christian, and they would just try to get me to live that old lifestyle, put it in my face and be like, come on. And I was like, guys, I know Jesus now. And I would try to witness and be the light at the party. And I realized, man, in a room full of drunk and high people, being the only sober one, you guys are fools. And I was that guy. So not judging, but your eyes are open, right? Yeah. And so as a Christian, I realized okay, what gifts are there? And I started doing evangelism pretty heavily, sharing tracts. You remember the old school tracts where you so I would just go on random walks downtown and in Oakland and the malls, and I just try to strike up conversations very awkwardly. But I found fruit in that when I did these Bible studies with unbelievers, just open up the Bible verse by verse, and they would listen, and then they would ask questions afterward. And so I started doing multiples of those a week, and the Lord was gracious to allow me to see being a pastor in a different light. I grew up in a very traditional kind of church culture with if you were on stage, it was a suit and tie and hymns and organs, and the people I was reaching, I would bring them into that environment. And they were like, there's no one like me here. Is this for me, And it was a struggle. And so the Lord kind of opened my eyes to see, you could do church differently. You don't have to, culturally, things can shift. The gospel stays the same, the Bible stays the same, the sacraments stay the same, but the culture can shift. And so I was being influenced by a network of church planting pastors, and I started listening to their teachings. This is the Acts 29 Church Planting Network. The idea there is we're continuing the book of Acts, as a church planting book. It ends in chapter 28, and we're the next chapter of the church advancing in the world. And so I did an assessment with them. It took about a year, a very thorough assessment where you're like laying your life out, you're laying your income out, you're laying your giving out, your tax, like it's very, very invasive in a good way. And my wife and I, through prayer and fasting and counsel, we said, look, if we can get through this assessment and they give us a green light, we're going to take that as a call from God, right? So we did it. And I remember being in that room with those pastors and a pastor's wife, and they're drilling us with questions, and really good questions. And at the end, I was like, well, what do you guys think? And they were like, you should plant a church. And I was like, when? And they were like, now. And I was already on a team of pastors at the church that I was a part of, Penhill's Lions Church. And so I started making the transition. And so we planted the church in my living room in 2014, right in Penn Hills, right down the street here from where we're recording. And the Lord was gracious to multiply that. People on the steps, people in the kitchen, people packed into the hallways. And it was fun. And we lasted about a year there. And we were aiming to get into Wilkinsburg. Like, that was our hope. And so we found a church that would rent to us in Wilkinsburg, Covenant Reformed Presbyterian Church. So we're still there. They meet in the morning. We have the building in the evening. And
is that right on Penn Avenue?
It is. It's right off Penn. Make a left at the car wash, and then boom, 2 blocks.
All right.
Yep. And so we've been reaching out to Wilkinsburg for the past like 9-10 years. And, any church, all church has sinful struggles. Our church specifically, a lot of addicts, a lot of broken marriages, a lot of struggling people, mental illness. And so God's been gracious to just give us that flavor and culture. And so it's okay to not be okay in our church, but we want you to change.
Come on.
We want you to stay there, right?
Yeah.
Like, we want you to grow. And so, it's a typical expository, just go through the scriptures verse by verse, book by book, but then, throughout the week, there's a lot of counseling and a lot of walking alongside with one another and discipleship and, a lot of things that are common to a lot of churches, making disciples and evangelizing. What would be typical Christianity, biblical
That's
Christianity.
not so common anymore, is making disciples.
Sadly, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that you brought up that it was very almost unattainable for those who came into the church that you would take them to, and how that is kind of a turnoff, and that now that you're approaching it with that same lens to say, hey, we've got to make this a realistic environment, like where everything else in the world that you're seeing, it's relatable, but it has the power of God. So take me back, that moment when you were 17 years old and you said God met you.
Yes.
What did that moment look like? And then what happened that brought your wife to the Lord?
Wow, good question.
Yeah, I wanted to know that too about the wife.
Yeah.
You went from her not knowing the Lord to beginning ministry.
Yeah, great question. So, I was sitting in Schumann, and I think it was lockdown, so you just had to stay in your cell, and you got this metal bed with a really thin mattress and a little pillow and like a tiny bit of toilet paper. Not even a seat on the toilet. It's miserable, like prison's miserable. And I prayed for the first time in years. When I thought of Jesus in those days where I was actively rebelling, I thought about hell. I was like, if I die, I'm going to hell. I knew it. I believed. Wow. But I wasn't born again, and I was not favorable towards Jesus. He was the judge, and I was guilty. That's the way I thought about it. That's how I know I was not a Christian. And so anyway, I prayed, and that led, to when I was 19, just very short version of it. My wife and I were at this party. We were both drunk, very drunk. And we got in this big fight, and the police came, and like we ran into the woods. We were kind of by woods, and police are everywhere. The lights are searching for us, and I'm like in an embankment watching them, and their searchlights are. And she doesn't have shoes on, so I'm holding her, right? And we pop out of that after 10 minutes of the police being gone, and we start fighting again in the middle of the street. And so I hop in my car. I'm angry. I start driving away, and it hits me. You're drunk, there's police everywhere. And I was like, God, if you get me home, I'll never drink again.
So you had one of those moments.
And I never drank again.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. I was 19 years old. And then the thought process almost immediately after that was like, man, you're not drinking anymore. You're not doing narcotics anymore. You're not tripping anymore. You should just go all in for Jesus. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And like, boom, everything changed. God got a hold of me. I was born again. The things I once loved, I began to hate. The things I once hated, like being around Christians, I was like, I want to go to church and be a part of Bible studies. I want to read the Bible. I want to hear sermons. I want to study commentaries. Like, what in the world is happening to me? And so for my wife, she I started in a drug and alcohol ministry. I would bring her along, and we were in an outdoor meeting, and the guy leading said, I pray that if there's anyone here who's not born again, who's not a Christian, that there would be gospel conversations on the way home. And so we're driving home, and Megan says, what was that guy talking about? And she came to Christ on the way home that night.
Let's go!
Yeah.
I love that close, too,
Who
by
was
the
the
way.
one that led the, did you guys meet in the club or in the streets doing drugs, or did one of y'all lead the other one into using and things like that, or was it
We
y'all?
were both kind of partying in our teenage
doing your thing,
years,
okay.
and so our
Okay.
friend circles overlapped, and yeah, we were just partying. You know?
I mean, that's amazing. Pastor Chris, your story is so powerful, and we're so thankful for Eternal City Church. We're thankful for what you're doing here in the Pittsburgh region, and we just pray blessings over you and all of your ministry.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thanks for having me.
you.
Yeah,
Yes.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, stay tuned as we wrap up today's show with some powerful insights from our guests. You won't want to miss our final takeaways when we return in just 60 seconds.
We left the light on for you. Cornerstone Network is your home for Christian television. A place of rest, a beacon of truth, your source of encouragement and entertainment. Welcome home.
Welcome back to Unscripted Faith. Pastor Jay, we had some phenomenal conversations. And what I think struck me most was that both Chris's, both of our Chris's today, had these stories of addiction and struggle. And in the middle of it, God spoke to them. There was nobody else who came to the rescue, but God spoke to them in this very lonely, dark moment and rescued them himself.
Yeah, you know, and whenever God speaks to somebody like that, in my opinion, is that somebody was praying for them.
Yes.
Somebody's praying. They may not have told us who it was, but somebody's interceding. Even if it's somebody that they didn't even know.
Yeah, agreed.
Somebody was interceding for God to intercept what intersect their lives and intercept what Satan was doing in their life.
Yes.
And you see the turnaround. So you know what's encouraging is no matter where people are in any addiction, any struggle, it doesn't have to be drugs and alcohol, be pornography, overspending, whatever it is. God wants to set them free. And I love what Pastor Chris is doing now. God sent him back to those very people, and now he's bringing them out of darkness into the eternal city.
Yes, into the marvelous light. Let's go. I love that too. I love that we are never too far gone from God's gracious, kind hand.
Amen. We're not, you know, and no matter how deep it is, he's bringing us out. And I love that, you know, he already knew us from the end, from the beginning.
Yes.
So the reality is, no matter what people are in, no matter what they're struggling with, he knew they were going to make those mistakes. He wants to use their mistakes, redeem them, give them a word, and then go and see the captive get set free in Jesus' name.
Yes, his grace is
Amen.
sufficient.
It is.
No matter where you are or your loved one is, God is present. His arm is not short. He can reach into the middle of their story right here and right now and rescue them. So keep the faith. Look up to the hills from whence your help comes from, and God will be sure to deliver you.
Cornerstone Television wishes to thank all our faithful viewers whose consistent prayers and financial support have made this program possible.